Hi, this lecture is about section 3.1, which is simplifying expressions. Okay, and the first topic that we're going to be learning about is combining like terms. Okay, so what are like terms? What are like terms? Like terms are actually terms with exactly the same variables raised to exactly the same powers. Okay, so terms with exactly the same variables, raised to exactly the same powers. Raised to exactly the same powers. Okay? So for example, (8x) and negative 3x are like terms. And why are they like terms? Well, because they have the exact same variable here. The exact same variable is x, and x is raised to the same power. So here the power is 1 if they don't write it. Okay, so that's an example of like terms. Okay, but what would be an example of something that's not like terms? Well, 5x and negative 3xy squared are not like terms. And why are they not like terms? Well, looking at the variable, the first term has just an x, whereas the second term has an x and a y squared. So these are not like terms because even though they have x with both terms, the second term actually has a y squared. So they don't have exactly the same variables raised to exactly the same powers, since this one has a y squared. So those are not like terms. Okay? And why are we learning about like terms? Well, when you're simplifying expressions, one of the most important operations you do is called combining like terms. Okay, combining like terms. So how do you combine like terms? Well, to combine like terms, what you want to do is add or subtract the coefficients, but you're going to keep the variables the same. Okay, so keep the variables, and add or subtract the coefficients. Add or subtract the coefficients. Okay, that's called combining like terms. So combining like terms is a very important process, which many of you have probably seen before in other classes. But we're talking about it again here just in case you don't remember it. So you keep the variables and you add or subtract the coefficients. And realize that the coefficients are actually the numbers in front of the variables. So for example, up in this example, the coefficient of x here was 8. The coefficient is the 8. And the other coefficient is this negative 3. Okay, so 8 and negative 3 were the coefficients for that first example. Okay. So coefficients are the numbers in front. So when you're combining like terms, you keep the variables the same, but then you add or subtract the coefficients. So let's see an example of combining like terms. Okay, so example. Simplify Okay? And problem number 1, we're going to do 4x plus x minus 7x plus 8. Okay, so 4x plus x minus 7x plus 8. Plus 8, excuse me. So there's two types of like terms here. So to be like terms, they have to have exactly the same variables raised to exactly the same powers. So the like terms here are the 4x, the x, and the negative 7x. Those are all like terms because they all have x to the first power. And then the other type of like term here would be the 8. Okay, so the 8 is by itself. It doesn't have any variable whatsoever, so it's a different type of like term. So to combine these like terms, we want to keep the variables and add or subtract the coefficients. So let's start with the red like terms here. So what are the coefficients going to be here? Well, this is 4, that's that coefficient. The coefficient of x, if they don't write it, is automatically 1. So I'll go ahead and write in a 1 there. Okay, so that's actually 1x. 1x. Okay, so what we're really doing is we're going to be doing the coefficients. So we're going to be doing 4 plus 1 is 5, minus 7 is negative 2. So we actually get negative 2x. Okay, and that's combining the red ones together. And then the blue one I can't combine with the red ones because it doesn't have an x. So it doesn't have the same variables, so it's not a like term. So we just leave it as positive 8. Okay, so our answer is negative 2x plus 8. And again, how do we get the negative 2? Well, we looked at all the terms involving x, we combined those, and we know that 4 plus 1 is 5, and 5 minus 7 is negative 2. And so we combined those and we got negative 2x. Okay? All right. So, should be good there. I wanted to do one more example. Most of these are not too bad, but I just wanted to show you a little bit harder one. Okay, so example number 2. For this one, we have negative 2xy plus y squared minus 5x plus 3y squared. Okay, so negative 2xy plus, sorry, I had doggy problems for a second there. That's my dog Gigi. I have a dog and a cat and they don't always get along. But anyway, writing down this problem, I've got more terms. So I've got negative 2xy plus y squared minus 5x plus 3y squared. And I wanted to write one more term. So let's have minus 4xy. Now the problems in your homework don't have this many terms, but I wanted to do a little bit more challenging one like this, just so that we can see how they work. Okay, so let's take a look at this problem. So this has a lot of different terms, and not all of them are like terms. So let's take a look at the variables here. So for the first term, we have an xy, and then for the last term, we also have an xy. So that means the negative 2xy and the negative 4xy are actually like terms. Okay, so these are like terms. Okay, and then what else do we have here? What are the other like terms? Well, we have the terms involving y squared. So we have y squared here and 3y squared over there. So those are both like terms because they have the exact same variables raised to the exact same powers. Okay, so I'll put a different symbol underneath those. And you don't have to write the symbols underneath, but I like to do that just to make it easier so I know which ones are like terms. And then the last type of like term here is the negative 5x by itself. And because it's alone, it can't combine with anything, so it's just going to stay by itself. Okay, and then we're just going to go ahead and combine these like terms. And again, remember, you keep the variables the same, but you add or subtract the coefficients. So for the xy's, we've got -2 minus 4 is going to give us -6xy. So we get -6xy. Okay, and then combining the y squareds, what's the coefficient here? Remember, if they don't write the coefficient, it's automatically 1. So that's actually going to be 1y squared plus 3y squared. Well, 1 plus 3 is 4. So we're going to have plus 4y squared. Okay, and then the last type of like term that we have here is the -5x. And we can't combine that with the other ones because they're not like terms. So we just leave the last term as -5x. Okay, so your answer should be -6xy plus 4y squared minus 5x. All right. Okay, so that takes care of like terms. Okay, so the next topic I wanted to talk about, this is still the same section, is multiplying using the distributive law. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing next here. Okay, so this is going to be example number 3. Same instructions. The instructions are simplify. And for this one, we have -3 times 22y. Okay, -3 times 22y. Now, how do I know that it's times? Well, if they just write parentheses like this, and they don't write a plus or a minus in between the numbers, then it's automatically multiplication. Okay, so this means -3 times 22y. Now, how do we do this? Well, normally if it had more than one term, we'd have to use the distributive law, which we're going to learn next. But for this one, all we have to do is multiply the coefficients. Okay, so multiply the coefficients. Multiply the coefficients. So what are the coefficients here? Well, those are just the numbers. Okay, so here we're going to be doing -3 times 22. And what's -3 times 22? Well, you can write it vertically if you can't do it in your head. 22 times 3. Well, 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times 3 is 6, so it's actually 66. But because there's a -3 here, it's going to be a -66. Okay, and then with the y, we can't change the y because it's a variable, so we just leave it as y. So our answer is going to be -66y. -66y. Okay, and that there was not the distributive law. That was just multiplying. Okay, there's a couple of these in your homework. I wanted you to be solid on them. Most people don't have too much trouble with that, though. Okay, now the thing about this is we only had one term here. The 22y only has one term, so that's why we didn't have to use a distributive law. But the next thing I wanted to talk about is if you have 2 or more terms, then you do have to use the distributive law. Okay, so example number 4. Let's take a look at example number 4. For this one, we have 4 times a quantity a minus 6. 4 times a quantity, so parentheses, a minus 6. So here, we actually have 2 terms. You have the a, and then we have the -6. Those aren't multiplied together, they're actually subtracted. So if you have 2 or more terms, you have to distribute. Okay? So distribute. Okay, and what are we distributing here? We're distributing the 4 to each term. So we're distributing the 4 to the a, and also to the negative 6. Okay, so what's that going to give us? Well, 4 times a is just 4a. Can't change that. And then 4 times negative 6 is negative 24. So that's going to give us 4a minus 24. And you might be wondering, well, why can't we combine these? Well, we can't combine these terms here because they're not like terms. So the first term has an a, the second term does not have an a. So they're not the exact same variables raised to the exact same powers. So they're not like terms. So our answer is just going to be 4a minus 24. Okay. Okay, cool. And for that problem, we were distributing a positive number. Keep in mind that if you have a negative number out front, you're going to have to distribute the negative number as well. So let's see that different process in example number 5. Example number 5. So for example number 5, let's do negative 4 times a quantity 2z plus 5. Negative 4 times a quantity 2z plus 5. So notice here out front we actually have a negative number. We have negative 4. And on the inside here we have 2 terms. So because we have 2 terms, once again we're going to distribute, which means we're going to multiply the negative 4 times each of these 2 terms, and then we're going to simplify. Okay, so we distribute the negative 4 to the first term and the second term. Well, for the first term, negative 4 times 2 is negative 8z. Negative 8z. And then for the second term, negative 4 times 5 is negative 20. Now you might be wondering, well, how did I get minus for both of those terms? Well, I got minus for both of the terms because I had to distribute the negative 4. So when you're distributing a negative number, you have to distribute the minus as well as the number. Okay, so we're going to get the minus 4 times 2z gave us negative 8z, and then the minus 4 times positive 5 gave us negative 20. And that's very important that you actually distribute that minus in that case. All right. Okay, now I'm just going to keep going with these examples. So far we've seen distributing and combining like terms, but you can actually combine like terms and distribute in the same problem. So that's what I wanted to show you next. So for example number 6, the instructions are still simplify, but for this one, we have 8 times a quantity, x plus 5, 8 times a quantity, x plus 5, minus 29. Okay, so as you can see here, there are a lot of things going on. So first of all, we have 8 times parentheses x plus 5. And then over here, we have a negative 29 by itself. So the way you do these is you actually distribute first, and then you combine like terms. Okay, so distribute. We're going to distribute first, then combine like terms. Then combine like terms. Okay, so let's start with the distributing. So for this problem, we have a positive 8, and we need to distribute it to each term here. So distributing the positive 8, we don't have to worry about a negative. So we're going to get 8 times x is 8x, and 8 times 5 is 40. So we have 8x plus 40 minus 29. Okay, so that was us taking care of the distribute part. So the next part is going to be combining like terms. Well, what are the like terms here? We have the 8x, that's the term involving x, and then we have the terms that don't involve x. So we have 40 and negative 29. So we can't combine the 8x with anything because there's no other terms involving just x. But we can combine the 40 and the negative 29. Those are like terms because they don't have any variables. Okay, so 40 minus 29 is actually 11. Okay, so what we got here is 8x plus 11. 8x plus 11. Okay, cool. So that was actually two separate problems, two of the other problems, all combined into one. But once you get comfortable with these, most people don't struggle with them too much. It's just a little bit of a learning curve at the beginning. Okay, so I wanted to do another example. In particular, I wanted to do an example with a minus. Okay, so this is going to be example number 7. Example number 7. Okay, so for this example, we have negative 5 times the quantity, 7n minus 5. Okay, so negative 5 times the quantity, 7n minus 5. And then we end our parentheses, and then we have plus 3n. Plus 3n. Okay, so what did I say we're supposed to do first? Remember, in the last problem I said the first thing you want to do is combine like terms. No, that's not what I said. What did I say? Distribute. That's right. So I said distribute first, then combine like terms. Okay, distribute first, then combine like terms. So here what we have to distribute is the negative 5. We have to distribute that to the 7n minus 5. And because it's a negative 5, we have to distribute the minus as well as the number. Okay, so we're going to be distributing the negative 5 to each of those terms. So for the first term, what's negative 5 times 7n? Well, we know that 5 times 7 is 35, but there's a minus as well. So it's actually going to be negative 35n. Okay, and then for the second term, what's negative 5 times negative 5? Well, if you aren't sure, you could write it out. It's actually going to be negative 5 times negative 5. So if you can't do it in your head, you can write it out like that. But because we distributed the minus, what's going to happen? Well, a minus times a minus actually gives us a plus. So those two are going to cancel out, and we're actually going to have positive, and it's going to be 5 times 5 is 25. So we have negative 35n plus 25. And then at the end, we still have a plus 3n. Okay, so negative 35n plus 25 plus 3n. Now, are we done? No, actually, all we did in that step was we distributed. We haven't done our second step. So our second step is to combine like terms. So what are the like terms here? Well, we've got the terms involving n, so that's negative 35n and positive 3n. And then we have 25 by itself. Okay? And then combining like terms, what is negative 35n plus 3n? Well, remember, negative 35 plus 3, they're opposite signs, so you subtract. So you do, if you want to, you can do it on the side. If you can't do it in your head, 35 minus 3. Well, 5 minus 3 is 2. 3 minus 0 is 3. It's 32, but you need to keep the sign of the larger number. So the number with larger absolute value is the 35, which is negative. So it's going to be negative 32. Negative 32. Okay? So what are we going to get? Combining the red terms, we're going to get negative 32n. And then we have plus 25. We can't combine that with anything because it doesn't have a variable. Okay, so it's a different type of like term. So our answer is going to be negative 32n plus 25. Okay, I wanted to do one more example from this section. So this is going to be example number 8. Example number 8. This is about as hard as your homework gets from this section. So this one is negative 8 times a quantity, x plus 7, plus 6 times a quantity, 2x plus 1. Okay, so negative 8 times the quantity x plus 7 plus 6 times the quantity 2x plus 1. So this one's really pulling out all the stops. We've got a different setup than the other ones. But keep in mind that if you follow the steps I showed you on the previous problems, it shouldn't be too bad. So what did I say you're supposed to do first? First, you distribute. Then you combine like terms. So 2 steps. So let's distribute first. Well, the thing is, here we have to distribute the negative 8 over the first set of parentheses. So we're going to be doing that. And then we're also going to have to distribute the 6 over the second set of parentheses. So over here, we're going to be distributing the 6 to each of those terms. Okay, so for the first set of parentheses, we have negative 8 times x is negative 8x. Remember, you're distributing the minus as well as the 8. And then for the second term, what's negative 8 times 7? Well, that's going to give us negative 56. Right? You're distributing that minus, so it's actually going to be negative. Okay, so we have negative 8x minus 56. Okay, and then over here, we still have to distribute the positive 6. But because it's a positive 6, we don't have to distribute any minus, we just distribute the 6. So 6 times 2x is going to be 12x. So we have plus 12x. And then 6 times 1 is actually just 6. So over here you should have 12x plus 6. Alright, so that was our first step. That was distribute. Second step is to combine like terms. So what are the like terms in this problem? Well, we have the terms involving x. So we have the negative 8x and the positive 12x. Those are like terms because they have exactly the same variables. And then the other like terms are the terms that don't have variables. So we have the negative 56 and the positive 6. Those are also considered like terms because they don't even have variables. So we can combine those. Okay, so let's start with the negative 8x and the positive 12x. Well, if we do negative 8 plus 12, those are opposite signs, so we subtract. So it's going to be 12 minus 8 is 4x. And it's going to be positive 4 because the larger number was positive. Okay, so we should have 4x there. 4x. And then for the other like terms, negative 56 plus 6, because they're opposite signs, you subtract. 56 minus 6 is 50, but you want to keep the sign of the larger number, so it's actually going to be negative 50, since 56 has a larger absolute value than 6. Okay? So our answer is going to be 4x minus 50.